Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, Ewan from WhatCulture Gaming, joined as ever by my fellow isolated friend, Josh Brown.
Hey man, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's nice and sunny, and it's getting progressively warmer in this flat because of your shirt.
Well, I thought, you know what, if I can't go out and enjoy the sun, I'll be the embodiment of the sun in my flat, and it might make us a bit happier. We've got some nice pink flamingos and some tropical stuff. Honestly, this shirt is too small. I've actually had to tilt the camera upwards because my nipples are on show. Anyway, this news isn't actually about my body, but it's about something quite important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not about Josh's nipples. It's actually about Spider-Man 2 being developed by Insomniac Games. We've known it's been in the works for quite a while now. It was kind of an inevitability after, how great the first game was and how well it was received and how well it did. And we've had some rumors kind of doing the rounds over the last, year or so, but more emerged overnight, didn't they, Josh Brown?
They certainly did. These were picked up, they were detailed on Reddit by a throwaway account, essentially like a dummy account, who apparently has a contact in the industry. So as always, take this with a pinch of salt. But what they're talking about does line up with a video we actually did, I think it was late last year, about the first batch of rumors about the setting, who would be playable and stuff like that. But these elaborate on that a bit more. So there's quite a lot to get through. So I suppose I'll just jump from the setting, which is apparently going to take place 6 months after the end of the first game, and it's going to be set in winter, which me and you have been freaking out about pretty much all morning.
Yes, I think that there are so many cool different bits and details that come from this leak, but the winter setting by far is just like the biggest thing to me, because obviously Spider-Verse was set during the winter, and that film just had such an amazing aesthetic. I think we all know that by now. But also one of my favorite all-time looks for Spider-Man is when he's got like the full Spidey costume on, but then winter wear on outside, like a scarf. He's got a beanie on, some gloves, some mittens maybe. It's just the perfect aesthetic. Yeah,
man, because unless you've got one of those high-tech Stark Spidey suits, that thing is going to be freezing cold. Like, that's this thin, and it doesn't cover any of the body. So yeah, like, for me, the best part of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie was when he's actually got a bit of a cold, and he has the hat and scarf and like body warmer on. I don't know, I don't know what it is. Maybe you can elaborate on this, but it's superhero games set in winter to me, it's so appealing, because I guess we don't see it much. So I like the idea of that happening. But yeah, apparently it's 6 months after the first game, and spoiler warning if you're for some reason watching this without playing the first game, but Peter is still mourning Aunt May's death. Apparently he's moved in with MJ, but this leak says that MJ won't actually appear much in the first act of the game either.
She's a working professional. She's got to get those scoops for the Daily Bugle.
Hey, I mean, someone's got to support this family. I mean, Peter isn't making much money on a superhero wage, is he really? So this comes with the fact that they're going to apparently also introduce Queens and Brooklyn as well, on top of the Manhattan map that is already there. And because, of the lack of skyscrapers in those areas, apparently there's a new unexplained gameplay mechanic that's going to accommodate this lower level play.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about this, because even though I think, Spider-Man PS4, Insomniac Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man, whatever you want to call it, I think that is the best Spider-Man game ever. I do have a lot of love for Ultimate Spider-Man, which kind of came out after Spider-Man 2, and is kind of the most, I feel as though next to, is it Web of Shadows? I feel as though those two are the most overlooked Treyarch Spider-Man games. And Ultimate Spider-Man was my favorite before Spider-Man PS4, and obviously that game did have Queens, and you ended up, using web-zip mechanics to basically, traverse that area. But yeah, the most exciting thing for me, apart from, the winter setting, is the idea of actually getting Queens and Brooklyn to roam around with. That's so cool, because Queens is such an integral part of Spidey's character. And it's just, we've never really seen it that much in the video game kind of Spidey games that we've had. It's always been Manhattan, and Brooklyn too is a great, it's a really interesting location that they've put in there as well, I think, given the plot details about Norman Osborn.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm the exact same boat as you. For me, Ultimate Spider-Man is my favorite Spider-Man game outside of the Insomniac one. And the idea of having Queens in there and Brooklyn, it's a good way, because you can't really have Spider-Man without Manhattan. But you can't just keep repeating Manhattan as good as Insomniac built it in the last game. You can't just keep repeating that, otherwise it will get stale. So to add these surrounding areas in, I think it's a great way to, keep that Spidey identity and add on top of it. I don't know what they're going to do for the third game. I don't know what else you can add to this, unless you take them into an entirely different city. But for me, that's like a natural next step up. But it is kind of weird that we haven't had Queens in more of these games. But you mentioned Osborn and Oscorp in relation to Brooklyn there. I don't know much about this, so what are you alluding to?
Well, the rumor mentions that he's involved in some super soldier cloning experiments, which again is kind of interesting. We know that Oscorp were all up to all sorts. We had the spider that basically, gives, I forgot the name of the spider, but the spider that gives Miles Morales his powers, the venom blast and the invisibility. And then obviously we know that he has what could be either an alien symbiote or a symbiote that he's developed himself. We have no idea at this stage. Insomniac are very much crafting their own mythos here. But the whole Brooklyn link, just for me, you mentioned super soldiers. You can't not talk about Captain America. And I'm curious to see now, we've seen the branding for Marvel's video game. They call it the Marvel Gamerverse currently. And, back when Spider-Man came out, we heard so much from Brian Intihar about how, this was meant to be the Iron Man of the Marvel gaming universe or whatever. And even though the Avengers project or Marvel's Avengers being made by Square Enix hasn't really committed to any links between these two things, I do think, if we're going to get any sort of confirmation, we did have references to Captain America in the first game, but I think if they're going to actually lead into super soldiers, I am curious to see whether or not Oscorp is like, well, the only super soldier we ever had was Captain America, and look what happened to him. Let's try and build a better super soldier or whatever. So I'm curious to see if there's any links they could make there.
I think they have to, like in the actual Reddit post itself, they even mentioned that it's a certain DNA, obviously alluding to Captain America. And it makes sense to go more explicit with those references. Like they were all over the first game. You could, as an you could visit the Sanctum Sanctorum, or you could go to, I can't remember the law firm, but like the Murdoch.
Murdoch, baby.
There we go. They were scattered all over, but to make those links more explicit, you don't need Captain America to necessarily show up to still have those connections. And yeah, I don't know how they're going to implement the cloning idea, because we've got this, thread with the symbiotes, because it's being confirmed by this leak that Venom, Harry Osborn's Venom, is going to be there. Eddie Brock's going to play a big role, and Carnage is going to be involved as well. And I'm thinking that if Harry Osborn is Venom, then we might have Eddie Brock as Carnage if they're going to do a weird switcheroo. I don't know, though.
That's interesting. That's interesting you said that, because the cloning stuff makes you think of Miles Warren and the Jackal. Now, obviously, anyone who read Spidey comics in the 90s is cowering for the hills when I say that thing, because the first thing that comes to mind is the Clone Saga. But what if, Warren was alluded to in an Easter egg in the first game? What if Oscorp has Warren working on different cloning programs? Maybe we could go in that direction. I don't know. The idea of Brock being Carnage is a really interesting one. I'm curious to see what happens there, because obviously in this universe, we know that in an Easter egg, we actually have a leaving card for Peter when he leaves the Daily Bugle. And Eddie Brock actually signs it, he says, was good working with you or whatever. So I'm curious to see if maybe he ends up, getting this scoop on what's going on at Oscorp, and then basically gets, given the symbiote as a way to silence him or whatever. I'm really curious to see how that all works out, because there's that, and there's also Mysterio as well, who was obviously referenced in the first game, who the rumors about. So yes,
Mysterio is the one I'm looking forward to the most, because and this is bad. This is bad of me. But when I was younger, I used to love Mysterio's power set and what he could do, but the suit, I just could never get past it. But since then, I've come to terms with that stupid fishbowl, and now I love it. So I want to see him as good as he was in Far From Home, you know what I mean? I want to see those surreal nightmare-style sequences. I think Insomniac could do so many inventive and just really creative set pieces with that villain. I think the amount of villains that are in there so far, whether we've got, the Jackal or clones, and we've got Carnage, we've got Venom, we've got Mysterio, that's a good rogues gallery for me. I think if I was going to make this game, I would keep the focus on the main story at least, focusing on a few core villains rather than trying to get all of the library in, which to, Insomniac's credit, that's mostly what they did in the first game as well.
Yes, I completely agree. Probably the biggest rumor from this, though, is the Playable Miles stuff. Now, obviously, again, major spoilers, if you haven't played Spider-Man, what are you doing here? At the end of that game, we basically, Miles reveals that he has the spider powers, because, Oscorp were developing their own kind of spider. It bites him, and, in the DLC, they kind of expand upon that a little bit. And, very much implied that, Miles is doing his own trading, and Peter's very much trying to keep him at arm's length, and basically said, no, you can't join me for this just yet. Just try and keep your feet planted on the ground. The rumor actually mentions the mechanic they have right now is that Insomniac are toying with the idea of making Miles free roam as well, kind of like Peter is, which is the model that I want. I kind of want to see an Assassin's Creed Syndicate style thing where, in that game, you switch between Jacob and Evie basically whenever you wanted to. Granted, there wasn't that many differences between those playable characters. And again, Miles has so many unique abilities that lend himself to his own playstyle. Yeah, the current rumor basically mentions it's kind of like Arkham Knight's dual play mechanic that they're kind of toying around with right now. But I would certainly love to see more of a free roam thing for Miles. I think he should have his own suit. I think he should really lean into the idea that there are 2 Spider-Men this time around.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as well. Like, it's a natural step up from the first game because obviously we had Miles playable sections before he got his powers in that game. So it makes sense to, elaborate on that with his new abilities. But it would be a complete missing an open goal if they didn't make him available in free roam, for my eyes, because you have to assume that he's going to be a huge part of this story going forward. I think that's pretty much it, apart from the web swinging mechanics, which do sound really fascinating. For my money, although the web swinging mechanics in Insomniac's game they were great, they looked stunning, like the animations were amazing, it still didn't beat Spider-Man 2, but it sounds like they're trying to beat that in the next game. They allegedly have 3 different styles of swinging. You have realistic, which is close to the physics-heavy, version in Spider-Man 2. You have arcade, which is more of a helping hand and more for, if you just want to swing around stylishly. Then you have hybrid, which is pretty much what Spider-Man PS4 had, which is where it's, it's still physics-based, but it does help you out over and over again. But what's really fascinating is apparently they have 2 animators working full times on animations from when you release your swinging, so when you're jumping through the air, which is mad. It reminds me of Arkham Asylum when they had one person working on the cape for the full few years of that development cycle. So hopefully we won't see the same animations over and over again. It sounds like they're really going all in and trying to make the best set of swinging mechanics there is, as it were.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Yeah, and the commitment to detail again is kind of astounding, and I'm looking forward to see obviously this shapes up on the next gen going forward as well. But yeah, please, that is all the news we have on Spider-Man 2. That was all the rumors that we basically collected overnight. Please let us know what you think of them down in the comments below, and whether or not you're looking forward to the sequel. And as always, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And head back on over to whatculture.com/gaming for more news, lists, and articles like this every single day. You can follow me on Twitter at YouMoonsThings. You can follow Josh Brown on Twitter at
Josh Brown with 2 R's.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
I was going to whip out of here. Where am I going to go?
I don't know. It's low. Like, my ceiling's really low, man. I can stick to the top like Miles and Peter at the end of the first game, but that's about it, man.
Nipples won't let it.